The mirror glass beneath her fingers was slick with blood. Behind the silvered surface, her husband was alive, watching her through a screen like a director studying his failing star. His voice came through the speakers, warm and sadistic. "You were the perfect experiment, Emily. A study in manufactured grief. Now, it's time to delete the data." She held a shard of mirror in her trembling hand. In 4 minutes, the town would burn him alive. In 5 minutes, she would discover she had never existed at all. 2 hours earlier, the floorboards groaned under her knees, yellow industrial carpet, stained with decades of transient sins. Her right hand, palm down, felt a sharp snag near the radiator. That broken, rusty radiator that had never provided heat through a single winter at the Starlight Motel. She pulled back. A drop of blood formed on her index finger, bright and immediate. Rain drummed on the corrugated tin roof. 02:15 a.m., the kind of hour when insomnia becomes its own form of clarity. Emily hooked 2 fingers into the tier. The carpet fibers crumbled like ancient paper. She pulled. The rotted plywood beneath groaned, a sound like something dying. A loose section, roughly 12 inches square, lifted away to reveal a dark void beneath. She could smell it. Dust, metal, something chemical and old. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Yellow cone. Dust motes dancing like tiny planets. And then, cold. Brushed steel. She reached into the hole. Her fingers found the edge of something heavy. She heaved. A silver briefcase scraped against wood, leaving marks like claw scratches. It landed on the carpet with a dull, definitive thud. A layer of gray dust coated the lid. The word "covalent" was etched into the handle. Her thumb pressed the latches. Clack, clack. The metallic sound of something locked for a very long time, finally opening. Inside, 20 microcassettes nested in foam. Each one labeled in precise, careful handwriting. The same handwriting that signed their marriage certificate. The handwriting of a dead man. Emily's breath caught somewhere in her throat. She picked up a Sony micro recorder from the corner of the case. Her thumb slammed the play button. The gears whirred. A hiss of static filled the motel room. The red light blinked, rec bat. Then his voice. David's voice. Clinical. Monotone. Like a scientist observing an experiment. Subject Emily. Phase 1. Total isolation from Parker's Creek. She thinks I'm dead, but I'm the one holding the leash. Emily's hand shook so violently, the recorder nearly fell. The static continued. The tape spun. She sat on the floor, her back against the radiator, listening to her dead husband describe her life like it was a laboratory protocol. The rain outside became white noise. The world contracted to a single point. The small red light, the spinning tape, the voice that couldn't possibly exist. She didn't hear the car pull into the motel parking lot. She didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. She only heard the chime of the lobby door at 3:00 a.m. A sharp, electric sound that cut through the tape. Emily ejected the cassette and shoved everything back into the briefcase. She moved to the door and cracked it open. The hallway was empty. She slipped into the lobby just as a tall man in a charcoal wool coat was shaking rain from his hem. Steam rose from his shoulders like he'd come from somewhere far colder than just the parking lot. He had David's eyes, the same sharp, predatory ice blue. The man leaned over the counter. He tapped a thick manila envelope against the wood. The rhythm was deliberate, mocking. "The probate is finished, Emily. Every nail, every floorboard of this shithole belongs to me now." Her hand crept toward the silent alarm button under the ledge. Quick, practiced. She'd worked as night manager here for 6 months. She knew the protocol. The man caught her wrist before she could touch it. His grip was like a steel shackle. He didn't look down. He stared directly into her eyes. "I'm Julian," he said, "David's brother. And I know you found it, Emily. David always said you were a nosy little bird, but birds have cages for a reason." His breath smelled of peppermint and cold air. He leaned in closer. She could see the faint scar along his jawline, a mirror of one she'd seen in photographs of David, back when she still believed the photographs were real. Julian dropped a silver key onto the counter. It had the number 104 engraved on it. Small scratch on the surface, like it had been used 1,000 times before. "Go back to your room," Julian said. "Wait for me there. We have so much to discuss about your late husband's estate." He released her wrist. The skin was already showing red marks. 5 perfect finger imprints. Julian turned and walked toward the hallway, his boots thumping rhythmically on the linoleum. The fluorescent lights above made his shadow stretch impossibly long. He was heading for her room. Emily stood frozen. The briefcase was still in room 104. Hidden under the bed, but not well hidden. Not hidden well enough from a man who clearly knew the place existed. She moved, not toward him, away, out through the back utility door, into the rain. The gravel in the parking lot kicked up behind her heels. Her rusted 2005 Ford Taurus sat where it always sat, in the back corner, where no one bothered to look. She had her keys in her pocket. The ignition was 5 seconds away. A police cruiser pulled into the lot, blocking her car. Blue and red lights drowned the world in a rhythmic strobe. The colors washed over her skin like she was drowning in neon. Officer Miller stepped out, his hand resting on his holster. His face was half shadow. The brim of his hat cut across his eyes in a line of pure darkness. "Little late for a drive, Emily. Julian says you've stolen some company property." His voice was mocking, professional, like he'd practiced this exact conversation 100 times before. Emily ran, not toward the car, toward the woods behind the motel. The briefcase was still tucked under her arm. She could feel the weight of it, all those tapes, all those lies, all those years cataloged and indexed like a specimen collection. Miller's footsteps pounded behind her. She could hear his breathing, heavier, less controlled. She grabbed the briefcase by its edges and swung it like a club. Miller had been closing fast. The edge of the steel caught him across the jaw. A spray of blood and spit flew into the rain. He made a sound like an animal shot. His hand went to his face, blood seeping through his fingers. He recovered faster than she expected. His hands grabbed her by the hair and slammed her against the wet hood of her Taurus. Her head bounced off the metal. The briefcase slid across the hood, metal screaming against metal. Stars exploded in her vision. Emily drove a knee upward. It connected. Miller's breath came out in a wheeze, a sound like he was choking on his own scream. She shoved him off and scrambled for the briefcase. Her fingers clawed at the wet steel as she rolled onto the asphalt. Her knuckles were scraped raw, blood mixed with rainwater. She made it to the car, the keys in her hand, in the ignition. The Ford roared to life, a sound like something ancient waking up. She floored it. The tires spun on the wet asphalt. Miller was behind her, reaching for the bumper. But she was already moving, already gone, already driving toward the dark heart of Parker's Creek. The main road stretched ahead. Nothing but black pavement and the occasional reflection of her headlights in the rain. Behind her, red and blue lights twisted through the darkness. Miller's cruiser, following at a distance. Not close enough to catch her. Not yet. She didn't drive toward the interstate. She couldn't. They'd have someone waiting there. Instead, she drove deeper into town, toward the diner on 5th Street, toward the place that never closed, the old Mel's. A relic from the 1950s with chrome trim and a neon sign that had been dying for a decade. She pulled around back and killed the lights. The diner was open. It was always open. She pushed through the kitchen entrance. No one was working. No one was ever working at 4:15 a.m. Just the hum of the refrigerators and the smell of grease so thick, it felt like it had a physical weight. Emily crawled under a vinyl booth in the far corner. The plastic was cracked. Tape patched the worst of the tears. She pulled the briefcase in after her. The fluorescent lights buzzed. One of them was on its last life, flickering in a rhythm that felt almost like Morse code. SOS, SOS, SOS. She fumbled another tape into the recorder. Town Operations, Payroll. The label was in David's handwriting. The tape clicked and began to spin. David's voice filled the small space under the booth. Clinical, arrogant, like he was reading a grocery list of human beings he owned. Miller is on the monthly retainer. Sarah handles the gaslighting regarding the mail. Emily must never receive a letter that isn't vetted. The grocery store is the primary vector for social pressure. 3 times a week, Sarah will make a comment about Emily's weight, her clothes, her isolation. Nothing overtly cruel, just enough to maintain the baseline anxiety. Emily's hands were shaking too much to hold the recorder steady. The local doctor, Henderson, is on Phase 2 authorization. If Emily escalates beyond controllable panic, he can authorize sedation. The pretext is always exhaustion or minor infection. The pharmacy is partnered. They understand the protocol. She pulled a ledger from the briefcase. Financial records. Neat columns of figures and dates. She flipped past pages and pages of names, amounts, dates. Thousands of dollars flowing out every month. A steady stream to people she thought were neighbors, friends, professionals who had her trust. Then she found the page titled Isolation Quota. Her name was at the top. Below it, a timeline of her life since David died 3 years ago. But these weren't memories. They were incidents, cataloged and measured like laboratory results. July 14th. Successfully triggered panic attack via fake utility bill. Duration, 47 minutes. Optimal. August 3rd. Social interaction attempt at library. Sarah, intervention deployed. Target retreated as predicted. September 12th. Emily opened encrypted email account. Accessed before delivery could be compromised. Recommend upgraded monitoring. Suggest planting evidence of affair in sent folder. Emily wanted to scream. She wanted to vomit. She wanted to go back in time to the moment she first heard David's voice on that tape and smash the recorder to pieces before it could tell her what she already knew was true. That nothing in her life had ever been real. A shadow fell across the booth. She looked up at the diner window. 3 figures stood outside in the rain, perfectly still, wearing identical yellow slickers. Watching her, their faces were hidden under the hoods. Just darkness and the glint of rain on vinyl. They started tapping the glass in unison. Tink, tink, tink. The sound was rhythmic, hypnotic, like a code. Emily grabbed the briefcase and crawled toward the kitchen. She could hear the figures moving around the diner now. The front door chime, that same electronic sound that had betrayed her an hour earlier, rang again. She crawled out through the back. Her hands were bleeding. Her breath was coming in short, sharp gasps that felt like she was swallowing broken glass. Main Street Hardware was only 2 blocks away. She ran. The pavement was slick and reflected the neon signs like a mirror of the sky. The rain was getting heavier, the kind of rain that feels personal, vengeful. Julian was already waiting for her when she reached the hardware store. He kicked open the front door, just as Emily tried to lock it from the inside. The glass shattered inward in a cascade of diamonds. He stepped through the shards without flinching. Blood marked his footsteps on the floor. Emily sprinted down the aisle of gardening tools. She grabbed a heavy-duty bolt cutter and swung it as Julian rounded the corner. He dodged. The tool smashed into a display of birdseed. Plastic tore open. Seeds spilled onto the floor like water. Julian caught the handles of the bolt cutter and twisted. Emily was thrown against a rack of chains. The metal rattled and wrapped around her shoulders. She could feel the rust transferring to her skin, could taste the iron in the air. She reached out blindly and grabbed a can of pressurized spray paint. She slammed it against the edge of a display, puncturing it. The hissing was immediate and violent. She aimed the blue cloud at Julian's face. He screamed. His hands went to his eyes. The blue paint dripped down his face like he was crying artificial tears. Emily brought the briefcase up and clubbed him across the temple with the bottom edge of the steel case. Julian went down hard. He didn't get up immediately, but she could hear him breathing, could hear him moving. He wasn't down for long. Emily ran deeper into the store. There was a back exit, through office supplies, through the lawn furniture section. She could see the red exit sign glowing in the darkness like a promise. But before she could reach it, she saw it. A map on the wall. Main Street, the street she was on. Certain houses circled in red, her observation points. Names written in David's handwriting. Miller, 147 Oak Lane. Sarah, 22 Riverside. Henderson, the corner clinic. Dr. Reeves. Others. So many others. And a note in the margin. Dawn reset. Room 104. Sedative protocol, So 6 Zars AM. Final phase. Emily checked her watch. 05:02 AM. 58 minutes. She heard sirens outside. They were coming from multiple directions. Not just Miller's cruiser. Multiple vehicles. Multiple officers who were all part of this. Part of David. Part of the machine that had been slowly dismantling her sanity for 3 years. She found the shotgun under the hardware counter. Old. Probably from before the store was even built. One red shell sat in the breech. She checked the chamber. 1 shot. That was all she had. She clicked the safety off. The sound was mechanical. Absolute. Final. The megaphone crackled to life outside. Emily Parker, for your own safety, return to the motel. Emily Parker, for your own safety, return to the motel. A white van sat in the middle of Main Street. No license plates, no identifying marks. Just white and rain, and the distorted voice coming through the speaker like a polite kidnapper. Like someone asking you to come quietly. Emily took a breath. She walked toward the door. Main Street was empty. The storefronts were dark. The streetlights cast pools of sickly yellow illumination on the wet pavement. Nothing moved except the rain. Sarah stepped out from behind the corner of the pharmacy. She was holding a hunting knife. The blade caught the light and threw it back like a mirror. Just take your medicine, Emily. It's easier if you don't remember. Her voice was sweet, maternal, psychopathic. Sarah lunged. Emily swung the butt of the shotgun into Sarah's ribs. There was a sickening crack. Sarah collapsed, gasping, but grabbed Emily's ankle as she fell. The grip was desperate, the grip of someone who didn't want to let go. Emily kicked. Sarah's hand slipped away. Officer Miller appeared from behind the fountain in the town square. He was firing, 2 sharp gunshots that echoed off the buildings. A bullet grazed Emily's shoulder, tearing the fabric of her coat. She dove behind a stone planter. Sparks flew from the stone where the next bullet hit. Emily popped up and fired the shotgun. The blast was thunderous. orange flare from the muzzle. The cruiser's windshield near Miller shattered into 1,000 diamonds. He was forced to cover his face as glass rained down around him. More figures emerged from the shadows. The neighbors, the network, all of them converging on the center of town like they were being pulled by the same invisible string. Emily ran. They herded her without ever actually catching her. She understood what was happening. They weren't trying to kill her. They were trying to capture her, trying to return her to room 104 before the dawn reset could be administered, before she could cease to exist. The Starlight Motel loomed ahead. The neon sign flickered. The Starlight Motel? The Starlight Motel. Like a heartbeat. Like breathing. Like something alive and conscious. She kicked her door open. Julian was sitting in the armchair, holding a glass of bourbon. He pointed to the wall behind the bed. "He wanted to see your face when you realized," Julian said. "Look at the mirror, Emily." Emily turned to the large dresser mirror. Behind the silvering, there was light. A faint illumination. The mirror was not a mirror. It was glass. And behind it sat a man. Her husband. Alive. Surrounded by monitors. Multiple screens showing different angles of the town. Different angles of her running. Different angles of her life. David was wearing a headset. He was smiling. He spoke into a microphone. His voice came through the room's speakers. Electronic, omnipotent. Like God speaking to a very specific and very unfortunate version of hell. "You were the perfect experiment, Emily. A study in manufactured grief. Now, it's time to delete the data." Julian pulled a syringe from his pocket. The liquid inside was a thick, milky white. He stood up slowly, methodically, like a doctor approaching a patient. Emily backed against the mirror. She could feel the cold glass against her back. She realized she had no weapons. The shotgun was empty. The briefcase held nothing but tapes. Tapes were just sounds. Sounds couldn't protect her. The sun was beginning to peek over the horizon. Just a sliver of blue light creeping in through the edges of the heavy curtains. Julian tackled her onto the bed. The mattress springs screamed. He pinned her arms above her head with one hand. She kicked, but he was too heavy. He was made of intent and purpose. She was just made of fear. Julian brought the needle toward her neck. He was laughing softly. Behind the mirror, David was taking notes on a clipboard. Documenting, recording, archiving this final moment for future study. Emily bit his hand. He roared and pulled back, dropping the syringe. It rolled under the bed, out of reach. He struck her across the face. Her vision exploded into stars. Julian wrapped his hands around her throat. His thumbs pressed down on her windpipe. Emily's vision started to blur. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, a thunder that was getting softer, quieter, like it was leaving her behind. Her hand flapped onto the nightstand. It found the micro-recorder. She didn't have the strength to fight, but her thumb found the button. She pressed it. She didn't know what button it was. There was no way to know. But the recorder beeped, and suddenly David's voice was everywhere, booming across the motel grounds. The tape, the same tape about payoffs and the script, played on loop through the PA system. "Miller is a pathetic drunk. I buy him for $500 a month and a bottle of rye. Sarah, she'd kill her mother for the incentives I provide. They're all so desperate, so easily controlled. They think they matter. They think they have a choice." Julian's grip loosened. His eyes went to the mirror with terror written across his face. Emily gasped for air. She grabbed the heavy glass bourbon bottle from the nightstand and smashed it over Julian's head. He crashed through the two-way mirror. The glass shattered. Golden bourbon mixed with blood and shards that caught the light like diamonds. Julian's scream was the most human sound Emily had heard all night. Emily crawled through the broken mirror frame into the hidden observation room. David was scrambling to shut down the PA system. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He was pale, weak. Nothing like the omnipotent God voice that had been speaking through the speakers just seconds before. Emily grabbed a piece of broken mirror glass. Sharp, perfect. The edge cut her palm as she picked it up. She walked toward him. David turned. His hands went up. Emily, wait. It was for us. To protect us. Don't you see? The outside world is chaos. I gave you order. Structure. A life without the uncertainty that drives everyone else to madness. Emily stared at him. She saw his face reflected in the glass shard she held. His features were fractured, multiplied, like there were 1,000 versions of him, and they were all equally guilty. From the monitors, she could see Officer Miller and Sarah leading a mob of people toward the motel lobby. They were carrying hammers and gas cans. The sounds of angry chanting echoed from a distance. Miller's bloody face was on screen. Sarah was limping, her ribs clearly broken. The people behind them were moving with purpose. They were coming to burn the motel down. David grabbed Emily's arm, begging, "They'll kill me. You know they will. We can leave. There's a back way. Please." Emily pulled a key from the console, the master lock. It was cold and heavy in her hand. She typed a final command into the keyboard. Upload all files. The progress bar appeared on the screen. It climbed. 10%, 25%, 50%, every secret in the network was being sent to the state police. Every name, every transaction, every tape, 100%. Digital ping. Emily walked to the back exit. She didn't look at David. She didn't look at the monitors. She walked toward the red exit sign and pushed the door open. David screamed behind her. The sound of the mob was louder now. The front door of the motel was being forced. The sound of metal on metal. Hammers hitting glass, rage that had been stoked by David's own voice, by his own confession. Emily stepped into the hallway and kept walking. The back exit was open. The rain had stopped. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Behind her, the Starlight Motel was a pillar of black smoke and orange fire. She stood on the highway shoulder and watched it burn. Ash fell like snow. She reached into her pocket for a tissue and found a micro cassette she didn't recognize. No label. Nothing to identify it. She put it into her recorder. The device whirred to life. David's voice filled the quiet morning air. If you're hearing this, you escaped. But remember, Emily. Emily Parker died 3 years ago in a car crash. I built you from the survivor of the wreckage. Emily's breath caught. Your memories are just tapes I played while you were in the coma. The childhood in Kentucky. The mother who died of cancer. The college boyfriend who broke your heart. All of it. Audio files looped and repeated until your brain accepted them as real. You don't exist without me. The voice paused. She could hear breathing on the tape. David's breathing, like he was speaking to her from beyond the grave, from beyond the burning motel, from beyond the point where anything about her life could still be verified as true. Your real name was Catherine Winters. You were driving drunk on Route 7. You crashed into a tree. For 3 weeks, you were in a coma. And when you woke up, I gave you new memories. I gave you a new life. I gave you Emily Parker, complete with a history and a past and a reason to exist. Emily looked at her hands. They looked like hers. They felt like hers. But the memories, the childhood in Kentucky, the wedding, the years she thought she'd lived, suddenly felt like movie scenes she'd just watched. The recorder hissed to an end. She dropped it into the gutter beside the highway. She looked toward the horizon. The sun was bright and seemed very far away. The road ahead was empty. No cars. No people. No network reaching out to pull her back into the structure they'd built. She chuckled. A sharp, cold sound that surprised her with its unfamiliarity. She didn't recognize her own laugh. She started walking. The highway stretched in both directions. Behind her, the motel burned. Ahead of her, the world waited to be entered, or rejected, or ignored entirely. She had no way of knowing which. Her feet moved. One step, then another. The asphalt was warm from the morning sun. The air smelled like smoke, and something chemical, and something like freedom, though she no longer trusted her ability to recognize what anything smelled like. She kept walking. The last thing she heard was the sound of sirens arriving at the motel. Multiple vehicles. The sound of justice or revenge, or just the usual mechanism of society trying to clean up its own mess. She didn't look back. She walked into the sunlight and kept walking, and the world began to look less and less like somewhere she'd been before.